What's up, YouTube? With the family gone, it's been really. Uh, I'm sure you're sick of me. Yeah, I'm sure you're sick of me getting on and blabbing about comic books. But I did pick up some more books. Went to Half Price Books today because we were bored, and I picked up. I guess we'll start with that. Just a 2 book haul. Picked up 2 books at Half Price Books and feel really good about um, what I pick up these days. So I'm really filtered. So if it's getting through this filtration system, I know I'm going to like it. Um, so the first book we picked up is Joker Last Laugh. This amazing Brian Bolland Joker cover. It's just a beautiful cover to look at. And I've been on this Brian Bolland kick. I don't know if it's just a phase or a fad, but I think I am really, really, really liking Brian Bolland. And the thing is, like, I've had exposure to Brian Bolland's artwork since I was a young lad. I read, I read The Killing Joke. I must have been like a sophomore in high school when I read The Killing Joke, and it was disturbing. But great storytelling as well. So, um, yeah, I kind of associated Brian Bolland, the name Brian Bolland, with that sort of sticky uh, story, and it was just like a really traumatic comic book to read. So you kind of put like, okay, Bolland is associated with trauma that I get from reading comic books. And I think that for some reason has really prevented me from really taking a closer look at Bolland's breadth of work. Um, but I got sucked in through Wonder Woman, through Bolland's work. And now I'm just like, I kind of want to pick up more stuff, not just Bolland Wonder Woman stuff, but stuff like this. And of course, The Killing Joke. Now, I think The Killing Joke is going to end up being one of the top books that we are on the hunt for now. So um, that is going to be pretty cool, I think. And, for me, um, for me, I think now that I'm focused on this filtration system, here's the other thing we picked up is the Jim Lee cover for Transmetropolitan. This was a series from Vertigo DC, suggested for mature readers. And this is Jim Lee's uh, first DC Vertigo cover. Okay? So if you just count up like the different companies Jim Lee's done work for, it's Solson, Marvel, Image, Wildstorm, DC Wildstorm, DC, and DC Vertigo. And I'm sure he's done a lot of other independent stuff as well, but that pretty much, and getting this book made me realize, what, this is a pretty significant book. Um, as a Jim Lee collector, would I put this on my list of priority books? And I would say yes. I would say this 99, this cover is really one of the last covers between the two periods. And I'm talking about like Marvel, Image, Wildstorm. That's one era. And then the DC era, which is just an absolutely consistent and rebirth of Jim Lee, um, and which has led to his ascension as president. So I'm going to outline my thinking as I show you these pieces, um, and why I think they should be. If you're going to collect Jim Lee, why these have to be among the books that you will have on in your collection or just have on your radar. So as I mentioned, this is probably one you should. It's not a there's nothing significant about this. Maybe it'll be something in the future, but what's significant is what it represents, and this represents really um, the transition from what he everything he did before DC is epitomized on this cover because this is his sort of first foray into DC, like doing exclusively DC stuff. I mean, he's done DC here and there. This is sort of like a bon voyage. I'll see you on the other side. On the other side of being, a part of DC. So you can, I guess, look at it as like a bon voyage to his past and a hello to his DC future. And that's this first DC Vertigo cover. I think it might be his first, but I'm sure he's done a lot more Vertigo comic stuff now that he's part of DC. But the first of an era. So let's go over. I've got the stack of books here. We're going to go through them, and I'm going to talk about them sort of at length as to why they should warrant your attention. Um, and we'll just start here with. Well, actually, I have to get my earlier books. Hang on. I always think I come prepared, but then I realize I don't come prepared. All right, so I'm gonna get my. I keep a lot of my Jim Lee collection in these binder books, and I'll show you what's in here. In this binder book, it's protected, but I keep a binder, sort of like a sleeve, like a notebook of sleeves where you can put your comic books in, like this. Okay, so I'm protecting it, putting it in the thing, and just storing it in a box. I don't ever look at these, except for occasions like today. Now, I'm gonna outline all the books that I think are crucial to a Jim Lee collection if you're going to collect Jim Lee. And I'm also going to outline some of the plans that I'm, in terms of my summer comic book plans. You've seen what I've done so far. I've got money coming in. We're going to go over what I'm targeting and sort of how I've reoriented my focus again. So let's get to some of these books first. First off, this is the absolute must-have, and I may pick this up in a higher grade, but I'm happy to have this one because I picked it up for 50 cents. I mean, it's a high grade copy. I mean, I would put it in the VF plus VF, no, solid VF copy. Maybe a fine plus. I'll put in the fine plus category. And that is official handbook of the Marvel Universe Book of the Dead Deluxe Edition. So official handbook of the Marvel Universe number 17, Book of the Dead Deluxe Edition. And this is Jim Lee's first work at Marvel Comics. and sort of his first work as a quote unquote professional in the industry. Um, and it's just one panel, which is what's great about it. It's one panel that would lead to the throne of DC Comics. Started right here at Marvel Comics. One panel now to the keys, the guy who has the keys to the kingdom. Um, so this is the book, the first sort of big book you should probably target because it's just a great cover. First of all, by Keith Pollard here on dead Marvel people, and yeah, it's a Jim Lee start, and then we go right to, and I've been saying this. This is in terms of important books. That one's important, but this is also, I think, um, we talk about Into the Spider Verse, and you think about all the different realm of possibilities based off our decisions, right? What if Jim Lee's first cover for Marvel Comics had been something like Spider-Man? What if his first cover for comics had been something like something obscure, like like what would be obscure at Marvel at the time? Um, let's say Muppet Babies. Okay, let's say Jim Lee, his first assignment was to do the cover of like Muppet Babies. I don't even think Muppet Babies was Marvel. It was like Star Comics, and then they merged or something. I don't know. Anyway, Marvel had all these like offshoot like things. Hey Glenn, hey K-pop, what's up? But you know what I mean? Like Jim Lee got assigned. First of all, this book, this one panel, led to more work with Carl Potts on this Alpha Flight book, and that set him on a path. So I'm just saying, with all the different realities that could have come Jim's way, the fact that he initially met um, with the trio, which had Carl Potts in there. Potts was probably one of the first people at Marvel, one of the first two people at Marvel to look at Jim's work. Um, and that set in motion everything that was to come. And that was work on this book, including the first cover. So his first cover is this sort of like, I don't know, it's not his best work. Like the dimensions are kind of off and whatever. You just got Wolverine kind of hopping out of a robot. It's not his best work. The early works are rarely are their best work. They it's a process, and they eventually get there. But this cover, again, significant because it's his first cover at Marvel. It's a Wolverine cover, and I think if you define Jim Lee by any standard during his time at Marvel, it's through two characters, and the characters will be Punisher and Wolverine. And Wolverine really is what catapults him to the superstar X-Men and the Wolverine, I should say. But that's what makes him like a household name among comic book people, right? Um, so we are looking. I'm just getting all the books that I think should be part. If you're going to collect Jim Lee, you should have it. This is the other one, and this is one of my favorite books by Jim Lee. And that is, if I can find it here, that is the Punisher War Journal number 19. He has a lot of Punisher covers, a lot of Punisher books that we could have put on this list, but I think his last book on the Punisher is just a must-have. He's on a jet ski. Um, I don't know what more could sell a comic book than what's written there. Um, so yeah, these three early works, I would say are just there's out of there's a lot more. Obviously, these are just three ones that I'm recommending that probably aren't as high profile Jim Lee books, but that should be. We're gonna get into more. I love this trading card variant. Okay, this trading card variant is um, it's like a book I'm in love with. I mentioned before, like we're going to try to keep the PC books to books where when you look at them, you just get that dopamine drip. You know what I mean? It never disappears. Some books you look at them, it's it's just like you don't get anything from the book anymore. But this is a book that will forever be a drip of dopamine every time I look at the cover. And so this to me is a must-have for any Jim Lee collector. Um, Either the trading card, which we don't have. I'm probably going to have to put that in there now, or the comic book. But this image has to be somewhere within sight of you. Um, and that leads us to some of the big guns in my collection. We've got a connecting cover here. I always say Jim Lee is the king of collecting covers, so you should have uh, covers A, B, C, and D in your collection, and you should have the gatefold E as well. So you should have all five of the best-selling comic book of all time. And I'm sure many of you either have a reprint or have this book. You probably have all five of the books. They're not hard to pick up. Um, but these are must-haves. I mean, it's the one of the pinnacles of Jim Lee's career, and it happened early. He's like kind of like 3-4 years in. Not even 3-4 years in. He was like 2-3 years into his comic book career, and X-Men sells something like 8.5 million copies. Like 3 years into your job, you become literally the industry's leading artist in terms of sales. And that's got to go to your head like instantly, right? You're like it's straight out of college, pretty much. Um, and to do that, to achieve so much in such a little time, um, says a lot. So, but anyway, we've got 90 signatures. These are from COA'd from, uh, I think it's called Express or something. They were doing all kinds of, sort of like doing these events with Jim where Jim would sign and then they would put in the little Jim Lee COA and make sure people knew that this was a Jim Lee comic book. And they were doing that back in the early 90s, right? Um, so this book got signed a bunch by Jim Lee in the 90s with this particular signature. I would like to complete the Jim Lee, and I could probably do it right now if I pay big money because they have them in sets. And I thought about doing that, but I'm gonna do it organically. Try to get these things at shows and whatnot. I do see them at shows from time to time, so if I can get them for $50, I'll do that. But yeah, this one here has Stan Lee signature as well. So it's a double signature X-Men 1. Um, on one of our, probably our favorite cover because of Psylocke, yeah. We get the Psylocke cover on this sand. Um, so yeah, those are two big books. And that starts an entire sort of love fest with Wolverine and the X-Men. Um, that makes Jim the toast of the town in the comic book industry. That puts the X-Men as the really the king of the comic book industry in the 90s. That leads to things like, the Fox uh, X-Men animated series, the Fox X-Men movie. I mean, it really builds into what the X-Men brand has become today, and Jim Lee had everything to do with that. Some of the other things I think leading up to Jim's work some of the other things that Jim Lee did at Marvel, you obviously you may want the Punisher War Journal number 6, where Wolverine has his claws through the Punisher's uniform, or we have here like Wolverine 24, this great backdrop. I believe that's supposed to be Hong Kong or Tokyo, maybe. Sorry, it's Asia. I guess it could be Hong Kong. I think it's Hong Kong. Um, Jim right there doing that. Of course, you all know how I feel about this cover. I think this is his best comic book cover uh, during his time at Marvel. His best Marvel cover. But this is another great one that could easily, be his best cover as well. I think that's a fan favorite, but I won't argue against that. Um, and then he goes to and starts Image, and his sort of contribution to Image is Wildcats. This is his sort of the story he's written, the work artwork. I mean, this is pretty much all him right here. He's laying his talents out to you, writing and everything, with this great team, uh, incredible artwork. The story was, I think, some of the problematic um, things initially, but then it gets kind of tied together, and it's a rocky start, but it gets going. Um, but this is, in my opinion, even though Jim Lee's the ascended the throne of DC, and he's this sort of like, now he's more than an artist. He's a industry executive that controls. He's sort of like the policy maker, right, for where the company goes. But um, this Wildcats is his pinnacle achievement as a comic book creator. Think about it. He'd done all this stuff for Marvel's content for years, and now all these guys, they kind of get to do what they create characters, tell the stories they want to tell, and that's what we get here in Jim Lee's Wildcats. I love these characters, and I was a big fan of Wildcats during the Image transition. I tried to pick up a lot of stuff from Image, to be honest, but I just don't. It was just kind of like there's not much substance for you to recall. It was just a bunch of like, you know, battle scenes and like them uh, tackling like secret organizations and stuff. Um, but there's not much substance to it. But that doesn't mean you can infuse substance into it, and use this brand or this franchise as a platform to tell stories for DC, which is, I think, kind of where my speculation on Wildcats is. I honestly believe Wildcats is coming to the DCU. And I think it's going to come sooner than later. But if it comes later, I'm fine. but I think Jim Lee is gonna want to see his Wildcats on the screen and really do them like kind of justice, right? Like um, he never got to see these guys turn into this blockbuster um, that could fuel a big publishing company. But he may get that chance now, soon, very soon. Um, and so that'll be really kind of exciting to see. Because if you think about it, all the people that left uh, Marvel, the only one that really ever got their no, I shouldn't say that. Batman Hush has been produced in like different animation like sequences. So I mean that's like a movie, technically a movie, right? It's an animated movie. So um but yeah, I mean, that you obviously want to see something that you've built into like a large billion-dollar franchise. And Wildcats has that potential. Spawn, I think Spawn can have that potential, although it's not there right now. I know Spawn's big in comic books and toy line and all that, but we haven't seen a Spawn movie since the '90s, so it hasn't really sustained itself. Um, but yeah, for me, I think um, I do not have. I think the top book that you need to have as a Jim Lee collector. I don't have it at the moment. I may have it soon, and I will share it. I'm not going to share with. Oh, actually, I am going to share with you. I have it up on my to get list, so we'll get to that in a minute. Um, and then we enter Jim Lee's Blue Period, and Jim Lee's Blue Period is the period where comic book sales start to plummet. And here he's grown this company, right? He's just kind of gone full blown ahead with like expansion plans, and we're gonna create all these books. He hired all these artists, and then boom, the boom dies, and he's left with really, you know, low sales, um, and just a bunch of artists to pay, right? So um, I don't know. I'm sure his mind was in motion, but he kind of goes back to Marvel, and he agrees to do. Um, he kind of just like crosses that picket line at Marvel. He goes back along with Liefeld. They go back to Marvel, which is really strange. But they keep their work going, and so they Jim Lee gets Fantastic Four, and that's a big assignment right there. That's the Marvel giving you the keys to the kingdom here. And he takes Brandon Choi with him, along with his inker Scott, to do the initial, books on this run. And this had a lot of critics. Again, I think Brandon Choi is not the best writer in the comic book industry. In fact, he's not a comic book writer. The Jim Lee just got his like school buddy who could write to write these stories, and I don't think that was the best. That was not the best outcome for Jim's books. So anyway, the Blue Period starts with a pretty sad kind of comic book. I want to thank Chop and Drop for this book. He sold it to me for $20, so shout out to Chop and Drop. That $20 has gone to his um, to a fund that's going to help educate his kids. So happy to support that. So we got to get into some other books. We talk about Jim Lee's creations. Wildcats is, I think, a Jim Lee creation with a lot of potential. But the other one you should not forget about and sleep on is Gen 13. Gen 13 was, if you recall the 90s comic boom, more than Wildcats, Gen 13 was I mean, Wildcat got its own animated series. Yes, that was horrible too, though. But Gen 13 was the first to get like, Hollywood consideration. I think um, there was like a pilot made or something, and anyway, it was very popular at the time, especially among kids of my generation. I think all the Gen Xers had to have been reading Gen 13 because the superheroes were people we could relate to. They were us, right? Um, but yeah, this is another Jim Lee creation that I think we'll see Wildcats before we see Gen 13. Um, but if that transition, like becomes a hit, like let's say Wildcats, the Authority, all these these like Wildstorm contents become a hit, and we're allowed to do more in that universe. Gen 13's got to be like, I think it's going to be Wildcats versus Gen 13. You're going to see that written into DC continuity, and you know, books like this will spike. But even if they don't spike, you should get it because these represent. So this is J. Scott Campbell's cover, number one. Early J. Scott Campbell work, I think it's really just incredible. And then 6 issues later, we get Jim Lee sort of homage to that cover. It's very similar. We get Jim Lee's homage to J. Scott Campbell's cover, and I love this cover, right? Um, so these are some of the things like if you really truly appreciate, the path that Jim has taken to DC presidency, um, and you really understand what he's worked on and how that has translated in terms of feedback from the comic book community. Um, I would ask everybody to take another look at. It's a first off, it's a period piece, so you're going to be reading a lot of like what was in pop culture at the time in the 90s. You're going to have a lot of 90s pop culture references. You're going to get like kind of the mood of Gen Xers, in terms of how the economy was doing, the prospects that we saw for our future. So that's really cool. If you like, kind of like going into a portal and seeing sort of like what the social, the social mood of the times was. That's a good read. Um, I just told you why Wildcats is important, and I think for me as a fan of both Jim Lee and Neil Adams, this is a book that's important to me. This is Jim Lee's cover, and then there's a Neil Adams cover as well. But they both have cover duties for this issue of Wildcats X-Men Silver Age. It's a Marvel Image crossover, one of the few Marvel Image crossovers that you'll ever see, because uh, all this Wildcat stuff is now owned by DC. So it would have to be a DC Marvel crossover if you were to ever get X-Men Wildcats. Now, I'm not saying that can't happen. I'm just saying it won't happen through Image Comics. It'll have to be through DC Comics. So this Image Marvel marriage of these two brands, X-Men and Wildcats, is something we'll never see again. And this one was signed, I think Jim signed 2,500 copies of this in gold. And this is sort of like kind of transitioning between 90s and his modern signature there. Very unique signature. This comes with the COA, but it's the Golden Silver Age, Jim Lee's grifter cover. That is an absolute favorite in the collection. I love that. I love that cover. Um, Next you could put any one of these books, like this Conan Red Sonja cover, Thundercats cover. I like to pick up things that where Jim Lee is doing a new and different character. I like to pick up all of the characters that he does. So the more obscure, the better. So that Transmetropolitan cover is a great example. Um, and so I've covered a few of the characters that I think the in terms of first covers or first appearances that Jim Lee's done. I've covered them. So we have the Grifter. Grifter is a character that I think you have to have in your collection. Gen 13 is another you should probably have in your collection if you're Jim Lee. Um, the first cover, first Psylocke's cover, right? That's a obscure Uncanny X-Men book. I think it's 260. I think it's 263. I want to say it's 263. But that's a must-have, at least for me. It doesn't have to be for every Jim Lee collector. Marvel Age 104, which I didn't show, is definitely a must-have, right? That's a great. It's the first Jim Lee on a comic book cover. Jim Lee's sitting there doodling away, and he draws himself onto a cover with I would too. He draws himself onto a cover with Psylocke, sexy with a PS Psylocke. And so when Jim starts to get books out and start doing characters, whether they're original characters, Psylocke is kind of his original character. I would say he redefined that character. He redefined the '90s X-Men, so that I feel like the '90s X-Men's branded in a way. If you're gonna, like, for example, insert them into some kind of story or timeline, if they come out in those costumes, they're from the Earth '90s X-Men, like timeline. Or I should say the Fox, maybe the Fox X-Men timeline, right? Although Psylocke was not in the Fox X-Men adventures, and that irks me to know, because it's basically cutting Jim Lee out of that, that rebrand. That's Jim Lee's X-Men, but they cut literally the most important contribution to that whole team, Psylocke, out of the Fox, and that's why I never got terribly into the Fox X-Men. I think they're great for X-Men fans and the kids. I never got into it, so it's just personally not for me. Um, but this is okay. So Jim Lee's first, uh, Jim Lee's first Wolverine cover we showed you, Alpha Flight 53. Jim Lee's first Grifter cover we showed you, Wildcats. Actually, we didn't show you. Yeah, we didn't show you. Jim Lee's first Gen 13 cover. We have it. I didn't show you that either. And then Jim Lee's first Batman cover comes in an issue of Batman Black and White #1. And that Batman Black and White has grown into its own, like, breathing, living sort of DC comic book franchise, which is cool. But that was like a '90s DC contribution that Jim Lee made to that book, and it was a cover. It was Batman with this batarang, and that's his first cover for Batman. So that one I do not have in my collection. I do have that on my want list as one of the books I want to pick up. I kind of want to pick it up naturally, though. Like, just find it at half price books for like $2. That's the kind of the way I want to do it. But at the same time, I do want to own it, and we'll see. It's not one of my priority books, though. Um, but so all of I've mentioned this time and time again. DC, Jim Lee's ultimate character, what will define his legacy, and what we attribute to every comic book artist, right? If you talk about John Romita Sr., right, you're gonna label him as the guy who worked on Spider-Man. Neil Adams, right? you're going to tag him as the guy who worked on really everything, but primarily Batman and Superman. That's how you're going to reference those guys. Um, George Perez, right? You're going to probably associate him with Wonder Woman and maybe the new Teen Titans, but pretty much a lot of stuff at Marvel as well. Or sorry, DC as well, and Marvel. Okay. John Byrne, X Men, right? Everybody's going to say X Men was what, even though he's done a lot of stuff outside of X Men, they're always going to say his early stuff was what defined Byrne's career. Um, and Jim. So how are we going to define Jim's career? And I've been saying like all the if you look at the early stuff, you look at the pre 2000 stuff, which is demarcated by that Transmetropolitan cover I showed you. Um, what you're going to see is DC in the new millennium. Jim, Jim and DC are basically kind of created what we have now at DC, right? The first 20 years, um, Jim's been integral to building what is now DC. And that starts here on his first cover work of Superman. And I just got this in a newsstand copy. It's on its way. It's a high grade newsstand copy. I paid $10 for it. Just got it off eBay when I realized its significance. And so this book here, go out and if you this is $1. I'm basically telling you to go out and get $1 bin book. Okay. I don't know when it will graduate out of the dollar bin book, but it should, based off the information I'm about to give you. This is Jim Lee's first work on Superman. Okay. That's his first work on Superman. It's a beautiful cover. And this is his first work on Flash. So if you like Flash and you like Jim Lee, but what you start to see now is, oh, wait, what's going on over at DC? Hey, what? Jim Lee did a Superman book? Wait, Jim Lee did a Flash book? Wait, what's going on? And then Jim Lee hits you with this. Batman 608, Jeff Loeb, Jim Lee, Scott Williams, Batman, Hush. Probably one of the greatest comic books of all time. You can definitely say it's the best comic book of the new millennium, right? Yeah, you can make that argument. It's one of the best comic books of the new millennium. Um, Hands down, if not one of the best of all time, one of the best Batman stories of all time, right? Um, and that leads me to like the must-have, right? You got to have the 204 and the Batman 608 second print. You got to have the two uh, connecting covers in your collection. One is rather this is the great thing about collecting. Okay, one is rather easy to get. This you'll find as $1 or $2 comic all day long. Okay, Superman 204. You'll find that all day long in high grade. Batman's 608 second print. Good luck finding that. A second print of that. Good luck finding that for under $300. Okay, you'll find it. It's going to be probably $300. Actually, you might find it closer to $200, but I don't know if it'll be high grade. But you'll find copies. But that is a harder book to get. And luckily, I got them both signed and sketched by Jim Lee, and they are anchors of the collection. So I just dropped a little bit of Jim Lee knowledge on you to help if you're going to get into Jim Lee collecting, and want to get my list of books, watch this video again. Um, Now we're going to get into my summer comic book plans. As you know, I've been picking up a lot of books, um, and they're not all big books. I got this, as I mentioned at the start. We got this great Ballin Joker cover, right? Just had to get it. These are going into the, my PC. And so I'm just going to give you an update because I think in my previous video, I did outline a little bit of how I'm changing up how I approach what's left of my comic book list. And we've changed this list again because I looked at it and I basically realigned what my core PC values are. And really, it's hyper focused on what I like. So I think I went through it. We're going to focus on a lot of Silver Age, Superman, Action Comics, World's Finest, Lois Lane, even Superboy, Jimmy Olsen. But I want to focus on some of the bigger mainstay titles first before we reach down into like the Jimmy Olsens. But yeah, that's going to continue to be like things we pick up, and that'll be a slower, that'll make it slower and have us waiting for the Comic Cons, because Comic Cons are oftentimes when you see the Silver Age stuff. You can go to like shops and they'll have Silver Age, Bronze Age stuff. It's just not as comprehensive. So you got to really wait for like a local show or something along those lines. But that's all. But I'm also focusing a lot on Bronze Age and Copper Age, like keys, characters, artists. Like I want to pick up more John Romita Sr. I want to pick up. I'm continuing to pick up Neil Adams, as much Neil Adams as we can find. I'm picking up John Byrne from the Copper. Really focused on Byrne. Really focused on Silvestri, on Jim Lee. A little bit of McFarlane, not so much. Maybe a Spider-Man run. A lot of Jim Lee's Wildcat stuff we're focused on now. And of course, Jim Lee's DC stuff. We haven't actually, we focus on some of the bigger books, but there's a lot of stuff there to really get our hands on. So that's something I think Neil Adams Silver Age stuff and Jim Lee stuff will just be long-term kind of like drudge work. It's like we've got a lot of books. There are a lot of books to choose from, but it's either going to be like big keys that we kind of spend money on, or just the drudgery of digging through long box after long box. All right, so I'm not reading the chat, and my apologies for not reading the chat. My mouse is over here. I just shut off the screen too. Hang on, I'm coming back. Yeah, I'm just so focused on kind of what I wanted to say. Sorry about not addressing the chat, but let me ask some of the questions here. Seems like I found my cure to insomnia here. I do have the chat up. All right. Yeah, what do you guys want? Well, let me know what you think are big Jim Lee books, and I'll let you know whether I agree or disagree. What are some of the Jim Lee's books that you have in your collection and why? Um, I'm curious to know why people, if people collect Jim Lee, why they collect Jim Lee, um, and to what extent. Because for me, it's a little. I gotta admit, I'm a little bit obsessed about picking up stuff, Jim Lee stuff. For me, that's the hobby right there. That's my collecting sphere, and it's a big project. It's like 680 some books, based off the newest, latest Liberty Comics Jim Lee variant. Uh, okay, this is from what period is this? Is this more recent? Comic Journey collects Jay Lee. He's better. Jay Lee is good. I'm not gonna deny that. Chat invasion. All right, everybody's tuning in. I have your attention. Thanks, guys. Yeah, we're just talking about Jim Lee, and these are my selections for the books you should have if you're going to collect Jim Lee and why they're important. Um, like for example, his first Superman cover ever, right? This is Superman, the Man of Steel, 119. That's a big book, and this this is dated 2001. This is came out in December of 2001. Really, the start of the new, right at the start of the new millennium, right? A lot of people, if you recall, there was this big, Y2K scare in 1999. People thought like the internet, our entire system, computer system, IT system would crash and cause like global chaos. None of that happened, and people were really waiting to see if the comic book industry would recover and what that recovery would look like. And I think you got this sort of refocus by Jim to be like, okay, I'm going to go back to doing what I do best. I'm not going to deal with this business stuff. I'm not going to be a chairman of the board anymore. I'm going to go back to drawing comic book covers, drawing comic book interiors, working with writers, working with inkers, and putting out a monthly uh, collectible. um, and so, yeah, like I think these firsts are really important. And I'm the point I'm trying to drive home is like Superman for me is the character that will define Jim Lee's legacy at the end of the day. Jim Lee's now the head of DC. Which character leads DC? It's Superman. So Jim is heading the House of L, and I'm really looking forward to when Jim kind of gets all this president stuff. When we're into his like year five of presidency and DC's ascension is well charted. Um, what I want to see him return to is a Superman titled book. And Superman right now, I think, launched volume 6 or volume 7 of Superman this year. I'm not I I don't know. I think you got to keep the legacy stuff. So you got to number it. I don't like all these volumes or they're starting new numbering systems. Let's keep the return the legacy numbering back, kind of like what Marvel's done with some of their Spider-Man stuff. But let's see a return for Superman, because I think it really does. DC needs to lean into that. That legacy is much longer than Marvel's. It doesn't even Marvel characters don't even hold a match light to the DC legacy, but they're more popular. I'm not going to deny that Marvel characters are more popular, and Miles Morales. I think CJ, you mentioned you thought, uh, in Edge. What is it? Into this Beyond the Spider Verse. You thought that was going to bomb. I don't think it's bombed. I think it's uh, being argued as like one of the best comic book movies of all time. which I would agree based on what I've seen, the clips I've seen, it's entertaining. So I haven't seen it yet. Um, Looking forward to seeing it eventually. Hopefully, I can see it on the big screen this summer. We may do that. I may go out and watch it tonight or something. But we'll do that. But yeah, that's where my focus is. So what I'm going to show off now, guys, is where I am focused on in terms of books to pick up. Okay, so what you see here in red are the books I want to pick up. I have a budget of about 4K this summer. Actually, I shouldn't say I have a budget of 4K. I have a budget of half of that. So we'll say 2K. I have a budget of about 2K remaining in my summer budget that we have dedicated to pick up to books. There's a caveat to that. After this September, so when my wife and kid get back, so after the summer of 23, by fall of 2023, I am going to take a big step back from comic book buying and collecting. And I'm just going to pretty much not think about my collection. It's going to be um, quite dramatic. I mean, we're going to save money, right? I'm going to continue to get $30 for comics, but that's going to go straight to like a Comic Con fund, and we're going to actually save money and pick up big books. So it's a big shift from kind of what I'm doing now, where I go to comic book shops and just pick up stuff, to now like selling a lot of the stuff that I have and investing into these bigger books. So these are some of the bigger books that I am focused on this summer. And let me just enlarge it a little bit more for you so you can see better. So this is kind of what I'm focused on. I want to get Superboy number 10. It's a golden age book. It's about, right now it's priced for $2,000 on eBay. I'm hoping to get it at a show for much less than that. But just finding this book is going to be a challenge. Superboy number 10. We want to find it in any grade. I will, well, I mean, it has to have a cover. It has to be presentable. So we're looking for it in like maybe 2.20, 2.5. But Superboy 10 is the first appearance of Lana Lang. We're going after that book. So Bronze Age, if you're talking about Nolan's Dark Knight, yes, I agree with you. I think Nolan's Dark Knight is um, probably the best comic book trilogy of all time. Yes. Um, and I don't think live action, I think animation has a ways to go before. I mean, it can do things live action can't. And of course, live action can tell a story that animation can't. So I would agree that Dark Knight, Nolan's Dark Knight, is, um, in terms of a film, is a better film. But yeah, I think, you know, the Miles Morales trilogy, when it will be all said and done, the animation platform will, I think, is getting a lot of notice from Hollywood. And this bodes well for comic books. Wouldn't you rather see comic books as animation anyway? Right? If it can be the highest quality animation, kind of like what they do with manga, right? If you can take manga comic books and make it a high film adapted content, um, wouldn't we want to see more of that? Like, just do what the Japanese do, like take Marvel comic books and then have Jim Lee animators animate Jim Lee onto the big screen, and we'll have like Jim Lee animation before us uh, as a moving frame. That's the evolution of comic books, right? Yeah, DC animation is that. I guess I agree with you there. It's just it's not a high production value though. I feel like the animation could be so much more like it's cartoony when they do the DC animation stuff, right? It's not like you look at the manga, go look at the manga animation, the amount of like time and energy they put into to mapping and drawing all the images out. It's quite incredible. So I'd like to see that more. And like Miles Morales is a great example of what the medium can hold for comic books, like animating comic books, right? Like that's Miles Morales is just the starting point, the tipping point of what we could see. We could literally see Marvel like have two lines, a film line and an animation line. The animation line could very well be topple the film line if it's managed right. So yeah, I think that's an exciting thing. We're living in an exciting time for comic book because that's a big transition. What you can now say, rather than say these things, we're writing them and people are just kind of eating up these stories. And so when we get around to doing a movie about this, like 3, 5 years later, we'll have like a core fan base to draw from. What we want to do is bring in the mass market, right? Well, if you have now a stream, like a linear, oh, this comic book came out. Now let's see it on the big on the animated screen, and then let's see it on the big screen. Like if you have that kind of linear movement, it really creates the branding for the mass market, right? Um, so that's an exciting thing to see come forward. All right, Wildcats Malibu Sun. We talked about big Jim Lee books that you need to have for the collection, and that is probably the biggest book that I don't have at the moment. Um, but we're scanning it. We're scanning for it on eBay. We're kind of looking for it on Instagram. I know these things pop up on Instagram every now and then. But just get out the word for me, guys. If you know anybody wanting to sell this, let me know. All right. We've got X Men 221, GI Joe 1, GI Joe 1, Transformers 1. Am I realize more and more now how big of an influence these two toys had on me growing up as a child. Like I played with these GI Joe and Transformers uh, for like 3 straight years of my life, I would say. So that's cool. And then X Men 133, Wonder Woman 83. That's a ball and cover. X Men 138, X Men 108, X Men 131, X Men 133, 138. I think we just picked up. I Ethan hooked me up, so I've got that one coming. I also picked up X Men 113, which is not on this list, but that's John Byrne's first work on X Men. So, or sorry, not his first cover work on X Men. Um, Killing Joke, I want to pick that one up. Uncanny X Men 136, 138. Jungle Action 23, that's a Black Panther John Byrne cover. um, you do have all these covers? Wow, good for you. Good for you, CJ. You got quite the collection. Jungle Action 23, I want to pick that one up. Green Lantern 76, that's the Neil Adams Green Lantern cover. ASM 121 is The Death of Gwen Stacy. ASM 55, it's a great Doc Ock cover by Romita Sr. Demon Days design variant. I'm going after that hardcore. It's a Peach Momoko. Uh, it's incentive variant that Peach Momoko did. It's a character design variant as well. Superman 1000, Jim Lee. And then, last but not least, we have Batman 251, the Joker cover. Now, that has dropped down my priority list a bit because I realized of the Neil Adams stuff, there's a lot more Silver Age stuff. I'd rather have that than that signature Batman piece. But I do want to get that Batman piece in the collection as sort of the one of the pinnacles of Neil's works. I do eventually want to add it, but I'm not as like obsessed about picking it up as I was maybe 3-4 months ago. So, um, all right, what do you guys got? I'll buy. I'm in the market to buy as well as trade. So if you guys want to do a trade, that sounds enticing to you. Let me know what you guys want in trade, and we can get something going. But yeah, like I picked up a lot of stuff. Hope you guys are enjoying. Let me know. Are you kind of enjoying my mad obsession with comic book hauls these days, or the kind of value I'm picking up, or just how I've shifted my focus and the different kinds of books I'm picking up now? Whatever you want to comment, I'm curious to know what you guys think because part of this part of this is a lot of my own thinking, and sometimes I don't maybe I don't think through comic book purchases sometimes, and I'm just worried this might be an extension of that. But I don't think it is. When I look at my collection, it's not necessarily about what I'll like now, it's like what I will like years from now. And that's really kind of where my focus has remained. And what I mean by years from now is really focusing on the stuff I collected in the past, to be quite honest. Um, the things I put value into. So I guess at the end of the day, that's really all that matters, right? You're putting together a core collection of books. You can't collect everything, although some people would do definitely try and die trying to collect everything. Um, but it's like you got to manage your resources with the space you have and work within that framework to pick up books. And so a lot of what you're seeing up here, this is sort of my I actually have mapped out my core 50 books. Okay, so these are the books I have. Okay, these are the books I want to add to the core 50, and then these are sort of the ones that are in the lagging part of the core 50. The ones we could eventually replace and switch out. Although Wolverine 27 is not one of those books we'd switch out. We'd keep that in. But we could switch out some of these other ones, I guess. But that's pretty much, these are the big books in my collection. And, I don't have like a big, huge collection of keys and stuff, but I think in terms of how that could change and where that's going, especially with some of these bigger books, you know, the collection is going to look a lot different over time. But I think in terms of the core books, these are a good representation of where I think the collection will land. I overpay a lot, huh? Why GI Joe 38? That cover. Um, so I have a, you know, It is the cover. I mean, G.I. Joe 38, there's nothing special about it other than the fact that it's this great Destro Storm Shadow face off by Zek. So for me, like having a sign and sketch on that book is pretty. In fact, I can show it to you. I don't know, Bronze Age, if you saw my pickups, but I picked up a bunch of signed books. Well, lo and behold, when I gotta find them, I can't find them. Oh, here they are. No, it's not there. Here it is. So, this is the book. This is a Larry Ham original. Larry Ham. Let me make myself big again. I love this book. It's never going anywhere. We have a Larry Ham original, and it's with the Arashikage tattoo right there, signed and sketched by Larry Ham, our favorite comic book writer of all time. And it was great to meet Larry Ham. I think that was probably the highlight of this year. Like getting a book like this signed. Getting my silent issue signed by him was definitely the highlight. And stay tuned for that. We're going to get that sign, and hopefully they recognize the sketch that Larry did. The signed and sketched cover CGC, we get that back from CGC in maybe 2 to 3 months. I don't see it logged on to CGC yet, so these guys are taking their time going back to Florida and getting processed. But it's been over a week. Well, yeah, it's been over a week now. So we're hoping to see traction, at least have it show up on CGC's website by next week. If we don't have to see it by next week, I'm going to have to write an email because that's unacceptable. Here's another big one. Batman Year 3. We got Marv Wolfman and John Beatty signature. I was impatient, put it in the bag too early, and the ink smeared. So John Beatty's signature looks like a smeared signature, but it is John Beatty. I just figured out I have a Dustin Wynn similar situation on one of his books. The thing is, I didn't realize it was Dustin Wynn's signature until this happened to me. And then I looked at that and I was like, oh, that's what that is. Dustin Wynn signed it, and then it's smeared in the bag, and it's smeared his signature. But you can tell it's Dustin Wynn's signature. So I have a Dustin Wynn signed book that I used to think was just like an ink marker, like, just somebody accidentally drew on the book. All right, well, there you go. That's where I'm focused, what we're trying to pick up. Last but not least, okay? I put in an offer for a big book. Okay, I put in an offer for a big book, and we'll see where we land. Okay, we'll see where we land. But if this guy accepts, I will have picked up something that was never on my list, never intended to be on my list, but I think will be the biggest comic book in my collection. So stay tuned for that. I know I'm leaving you on a big cliffhanger as to what that book might be, but if we get it for the price that I think he's considering, then I'll unbox it here when it arrives. All right. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace out.